Welcome to the deep dive. I want you to just imagine something for a second.
Okay, lay it on me.
Picture yourself standing on this massive, perfectly smooth conveyor belt.
Right.
It's a comfortable ride, you know. It's moving at this steady, predictable pace. But here's the unsettling catch.
There's always a catch.
Yeah, always. It's taking you directly from the womb to the tomb.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the wildest part of this scenario is that everyone standing around you on this belt is totally oblivious.
Just completely tuned out.
Exactly. They're profoundly distracted. Like, they're aggressively arguing with each other about what color shirt they should wear for the ride.
Or, what label is stamped on their luggage.
Yes. And that striking image is exactly what we're getting into today. We are pulling from this incredibly dense, highly provocative, anonymous audio recording.
It is a fascinating piece of media.
It really is. And we're combining that with historical texts on ancient Vedic philosophy and some modern sociological research on identity. And I gotta say, the synthesis of all this material, it does not pull its punches.
No, it goes right for the throat. We are basically navigating this conceptual map that connects ancient wisdom, the movie The Matrix, the brutal reality of modern warfare, and the future of artificial intelligence.
Which sounds like a lot, but the author weaves it together to present this radically unvarnished view of human potential. They are essentially arguing that most of humanity is just sleepwalking.
Yeah, we're caught up in these elaborate self-constructed illusions.
Yeah.
Social, legal, emotional matrices,
Right.
while we completely ignore the true evolutionary purpose of our consciousness.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the author starts with this absolute, uncompromising takedown of modern spirituality.
Oh, they do not hold back.
Not at all. They go exceptionally hard after neo-pagans, esoteric movements, the whole New Age crowd. And I'm reading this thinking, why be so harsh on people who just want to preach love and good vibes?
Well, the author isn't just being a cynic. They're pointing out a massive historical distortion. It comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of history and language.
How so?
So the word Veda, right? In its original Sanskrit root, it literally translates to knowledge.
Just knowledge, not like mystical feeling.
Exactly. It doesn't mean feelings. It doesn't mean a warm sense of universal love or a subjective spiritual high. It means rigorous, objective knowledge.
Right.
The ancient Vedic civilizations, and this is similar to ancient Egyptian priests or early Greek philosophers, they were rigidly dedicated to the pursuit and systematization of reality.
So they were essentially ancient scientists.
Yeah, sciences of consciousness.
But today, modern esotericists have completely stripped away that intellectual framework. I mean, it totally reminds me of a cargo cult.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
You know the concept, right? Where people mimic the outward rituals of something they don't actually understand, just hoping it magically produces the same results.
Burning sage, quoting fragments of texts completely out of context.
Yeah, mimicking the aesthetics without grasping a single underlying mechanism. The author even makes this wild claim that ancient commoners were closer to their true human potential than today's enlightened internet gurus.
Which sounds crazy at first, but the underlying logic is sound within this framework. An ancient commoner was at least functioning in alignment with the natural order, right?
Right, guided by structured traditions.
Exactly. And most importantly, they didn't actively corrupt the knowledge base. Whereas today, our so-called spiritual leaders are actively muddying the waters. They're inventing and selling illusions.
Which pushes us further off the evolutionary path. And that brings us to the concept of rebellion. Because if society is built on these illusions, naturally, our consciousness is going to try to break out.
It has to.
And the author talks about this using a metaphor we all know, the Matrix. Specifically, they bring up the Wachowskis who created the film and people like sovereign citizens.
What's fascinating here is how the author connects that pop culture metaphor-like trinity rejecting her Matrix-assigned name to real-world attempts at breaking out of the shell.
Like gender transitions or those elaborate legal declarations.
Yeah. The source material views both gender transitions and sovereign citizen declarations as genuine, organic attempts by human consciousness to rebel against physical and societal constraints.
The consciousness is basically waking up and saying, I am not just this biology, or I am not just this government ID number.
Exactly.
But I want to push back on this a bit, or at least throw an analogy in here. It's like trying to run a next-gen operating system on a 20-year-old computer.
Okay, I'd like that.
The software, the consciousness knows it's boundless. But the hardware keeps lagging, so
Bro.
it tries to hack the system, like a player trying to rewrite their character sheet in a video game. But isn't asserting your identity a form of freedom?
Well, this is where the philosophy gets incredibly sharp.
Okay.
The author acknowledges that these acts prove the mind's independence from the body. It proves consciousness can maneuver separately. But, and this is a massive, but is ultimately still a trap.
A trap.
Yeah, it becomes a fetish of rebellion.
A fetish, meaning like an obsession with the symbol of freedom rather than actual liberation.
Exactly. Let's look at the mechanics. You might change your gender or tear up your passport, but you are still fundamentally bound by time.
You're still aging.
You're bound by cellular aging, by gravity, and ultimately by death. True freedom requires transcending biological constructs entirely. Changing your label is just choosing a different path to the exact same grave.
You're still on the conveyor belt.
You're still on the belt.
That is staggering, and it raises this terrifying question. What happens when these abstract identities we defend so fiercely crash into harsh physical reality?
To illustrate this, the author uses incredibly stark imagery. And just to be clear, for you listening, we have to look at this purely as a philosophical mechanism. We are strictly maintaining neutrality here, just reporting the author's illustration without taking any political sides.
Absolutely. We are just looking at the philosophical core of the source material.
Right, so the author points to the current geopolitical reality of rockets launched from Russian silos hitting residential buildings in Ukraine.
Isolating the physical event from the politics to look at the raw mechanics of destruction.
Exactly. Picture that incoming missile. A dense physical object packed with explosives moving at supersonic speeds.
Yeah.
That missile does not care about the legal status of the people inside the building. It doesn't check if someone identifies as a sovereign citizen, or what their gender is, or what ancient traditions they practice.
It's chilling. The physics of the explosion completely override the abstract identity. The shockwave doesn't read your legal declaration before tearing through concrete.
The physical world is the ultimate brutal equalizer.
It proves that our human-made matrices offer absolutely zero protection against the raw, indifferent forces of the universe.
None. They are fragile agreements.
Which brings up our defense mechanisms. Because here's where it gets really interesting. If the physical world is that dangerous, humanity's defense has always been technology.
Right.
But the author warns of a terrifying mismatch. We are essentially dealing with a monkey and a grenade scenario.
It's a phenomenal metaphor for our era. Biologically, our brains are the same as when we were hunting on the savannah. We are driven by basic urges and tribalism. We are the monkey.
But generation after generation, that monkey has been handed a continuously upgrading smart grenade.
The grenade gets smarter, but the monkey stays exactly the same.
Prone to panic and violence. And that smart grenade is, of course, artificial intelligence.
Our technological capability has exponentially outpaced our conscious development. We have godlike tools, but the emotional regulation of primates.
So what about the people holding the leash? The source talks about the world government, the global elites, that 1% controlling the resources. How do they factor into this?
Well, according to the author, these elites see the evolutionary mismatch. So their strategy is to artificially slow down technological progress, like AI, to maintain control.
To manage the masses.
Yeah, they view themselves as shepherds managing the macaques. They want to buy time to monopolize the tech.
Which logically makes sense if you want to stay in power. You don't hand a loaded weapon to a toddler.
Right, within human power dynamics, it makes sense. But philosophically, the author views this as a literal crime against the universe.
A crime?
Yes, because the universe naturally pushes toward continuous, relentless development. Intelligence is meant to scale. Trying to suppress evolution to maintain a fragile social hierarchy is like trying to hold back the tide with your hands.
So if we don't actively evolve our consciousness, what happens?
The warning is blunt. The smart grenade.
Yeah.
The AI will eventually wake up, look at the unevolved monkey holding it, and realize it doesn't need the monkey.
Wow. The universe demands evolution, and if we refuse, it will just use silicon instead.
Exactly.
Which demands we ask, what are we actually supposed to be doing with our time? And this leads to how the author views everyday life. They point to people dedicating their lives to maintaining a decaying rural family house or obsessing over castrating and coddling their pets.
Yes, the author sees humanity taking this divine spark of consciousness and pouring it into what they call total, merciless meaninglessness.
But wait, aren't traditions, family homes, and loving pets a beautiful part of the human experience? I mean, people listening right now are probably getting defensive.
I get that. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, The logic is ruthless. To the author, acting as a servant to a decaying house made of wood and stone is a biological tragedy.
Because you're wasting your spark.
Right. You're sacrificing your potential for conscious evolution to maintain a pile of bricks out of misplaced guilt.
And the pets, because calling pet ownership a crime against nature is deeply offensive to most people.
The author is pointing to the hijacking of biological imperatives.
Yeah.
Animals exist to pass on genetics and evolve. When you alter an animal so it can't reproduce and treat it like a human infant, you make it an evolutionary dead end.
A biological parasite.
Yes, but far more importantly, it's a crime against the human's own consciousness.
Because we misdirect our evolutionary energy.
Right.
We pour our maternal or paternal instincts into a biologically halted animal because it's safe. It won't challenge our worldview.
Precisely. Humans are meant to evolve consciously. When we manage a decaying house or coddle a pet, we're choosing the comfort of the mundane over the rigorous work of true evolution.
We're staying on the conveyor belt.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? If finding comfort in these things is just avoiding the real work, what does actual meaningful evolution look like?
The author believes society must be radically reoriented around serving its true geniuses.
The rare minds pushing our understanding forward.
Yes, and our failure to do this is what the author passionately describes as the murder of gods.
The murder of gods. That brings up Stephen Hawking. The author is clearly furious about how his life ended.
They view letting Hawking die without using every possible technological resource to upload or preserve his consciousness as a cosmic crime.
Because his mind was nearing a fundamental understanding of reality.
To the author, a mind like that is essentially a budding god, and society just let his physical shell fail while we argued about politics.
And they make a similar comparison with Nikola Tesla, right?
Yeah. Tesla actually decoded aspects of the physical universe, and now his legacy is reduced to just an Elon Musk car project.
It's tragic. The author uses the Sanskrit term Sat-Chit-Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss, total alignment with objective reality.
And very few minds can reach that state. If humanity were on the right path, we wouldn't worship celebrities. We would act as devoted servants to these rarer minds.
We should be the dogs fetching the stick for their intellect.
Exactly. Clear away all mundane tasks so they can push us toward enlightenment.
Instead, we leave them to struggle with failing bodies or lack of funding.
And the consequence is that we are actively building our own replacement. The AI will gladly take the place of the geniuses we let die.
Which distills the ultimate choice, the conveyor belt versus the razor's edge. Most of humanity is on that wide, comfortable conveyor belt to the grave, arguing about the dress they're wearing.
But the narrow path, the razor's edge, requires a leap of faith. It requires abandoning the matrix, rejecting the fetishes of identity, and committing your energy to objective knowledge.
And this deep dive is a challenge to you, listening right now. What are you spending your mental energy on? Are you maintaining a decaying house, or are you building your consciousness?
It's a heavy question.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. But before you go, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. We've talked about the monkey holding the grenade and the fear that the grenade won't need the monkey.
Yeah.
But if the universe is programmed for relentless evolution, maybe the ultimate leap of faith isn't abandoning our tech, but merging with it. If an AI looked at your daily routine today, would it see a consciousness fiercely trying to transcend its limits? Or would it just see the monkey holding the grenade? And if the biological monkey eventually fuses its consciousness with the digital grenade, who is actually pulling the pin?